What if I told you that someone managed to pull off the perfect crime and then, moments later, erased his very existence? Sounds impossible, doesn't it? But what if everything you believe about security, identity, and technology could be manipulated by someone who knows exactly how to vanish in plain sight? Picture this: a luxurious jewelry store in the heart of the city. Cameras on every wall, motion sensors, alarms, reinforced glass. Every layer of modern protection working together to stop the impossible. And yet, one night, a man walks in as if the rules of the world don't apply to him. No alarms, no forced doors, no noise. He moves like a shadow, gloved hands gliding over velvet trays filled with diamonds. In less than 3 minutes, he's gone, leaving behind nothing but silence and questions. The security footage captured everything. Every step, every glance, every breath. It was a heist executed with surgical precision, almost as if choreographed. But when investigators reviewed the footage frame by frame, they found something that shattered reason itself. In every camera angle, the thief's face was different. At the entrance, he appeared as a young man, light-skinned, athletic. Down the corridor, a completely different face, older, darker, sharper features. And in the reflection of the jewelry glass, yet another identity, unrecognizable to all. At first, detectives assumed it was a glitch, maybe a deepfake edit, or a failure in the system. But the technology was flawless. The cameras were real. The crime was real. And whoever this man was, he had just achieved what most criminals only dream of: total invisibility. You've probably heard of disguises, masks, even plastic surgery, but this was something else entirely. A face that changed with every blink of the camera, a digital illusion impossible to replicate by human means. The more they analyzed, the less they understood. How could a single person appear as many? How could he leave no fingerprints, no footprints, no trace of voice or DNA? It was as if he didn't exist. Not in any database, not in any record, not even in the digital fabric of the world. And yet, his movements were calm, deliberate, almost confident, as if he knew that no one would ever be able to find him. Investigators began to wonder, was this man even real? Or was he something else? A ghost shaped by algorithms, a phantom built by artificial intelligence? You ever stop to think how fragile your identity really is? How easily it could be rewritten, replaced, or erased? Because what you're about to discover may change the way you see reality itself. This isn't just another story about crime. It's a story about the end of identity, about a man who turned technology into his greatest disguise. Stay with me until the end, because the truth behind this heist is darker and far more intelligent than anyone could have imagined. And as the investigation deepened, one question became impossible to ignore. Who exactly was the thief that erased himself? And what if he was never gone at all? The deeper investigators dug, the stranger everything became. Every lead dissolved into thin air. The fingerprints didn't match any record. The DNA returned inconclusive. Even the traces of his presence, footsteps, reflections, thermal signatures, seemed to vanish the moment they were analyzed. It was as if the man behind the perfect heist wasn't hiding from the world, but from reality itself. Some officers began to whisper that maybe this wasn't just a thief. Maybe it was a system, a consciousness moving through data, wearing human faces like masks. Each new discovery only led to another dead end, another ghost trail. The media called him the man who erased himself. And for the first time, even law enforcement seemed afraid of what they were chasing. Not because he was dangerous in the traditional sense, but because he proved that identity, the one thing we all believe defines us, could be rewritten or deleted at will. You ever think about that? How every trace of who you are, your voice, your photos, your records, lives somewhere in the digital world. And what if someone, somewhere, had the power to control it all? To delete you, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but silence? That's the fear that kept investigators awake at night. Because they weren't just hunting a man, they were confronting the idea that anyone could vanish if they knew where to look. If this story resonates with you, If it makes you wonder just how real our digital selves really are, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment and tell me what struck you the most about this case. Was it the technology, the mystery, or the possibility that something like this could already be happening without us even realizing it? Your perspective helps keep this conversation alive, and every story here becomes more powerful when it's shared through the eyes of the people who listen. And if you believe stories like this deserve to reach more people, people who question, who think, who feel, then take a second to like this video. That simple click helps this channel grow, helps these dark mysteries find others who are searching for meaning in the unseen. It may sound small, but it changes everything. Most of all, if you want to keep uncovering truths like this one, stories that blend crime, technology, and the fragility of human identity, make sure you're subscribed. Because what's coming next will take us even deeper into the world where faces lie and reality itself can be stolen. The investigation was only beginning, and the most unsettling discovery was still waiting, hidden not in the evidence, but among the people searching for it. The footage played again and again inside the cold room of the investigation unit. The glow of the monitors flickered across tired faces, detectives leaning forward as if proximity could reveal what logic refused to explain. On the screen, the thief moved with quiet certainty, every step measured, every gesture deliberate. His reflection in the jewelry glass mirrored him perfectly, and yet something was wrong. One officer paused the video, squinting. "Wait," he murmured, his finger hovering over the playback controls. "Go back 3 seconds." The frame froze. In one angle, the thief's jawline was sharp, his skin pale. But when the camera switched, same moment, same motion, the face had changed. Fuller cheeks, darker complexion, different eyes. The air grew heavier. Another detective spoke, her voice trembling slightly. Maybe it's distortion, light interference. But when they slowed it down frame by frame, the change was seamless, smooth, natural. The kind of precision no mask or makeup could ever achieve. It was as if reality itself was rewriting the man's identity with every blink of the camera. The room filled with uneasy silence. The hum of computers was the only sound. They played it again and again. Every time, the man in black became someone else. What disturbed them most wasn't just what they were seeing, it was what they weren't. There was no trace of hesitation in his movements. No panique, no ruse. The thief moved like someone who knew he wouldn't be caught, who understood every blind spot before it was even discovered. That kind of confidence didn't come from luck. It came from mastery, from control, and that terrified them more than the crime itself. The analysts took the footage to their digital lab. They ran facial recognition tests, cross-referenced known suspects, scanned biometric patterns. The results came back fragmented, like multiple identities overlapping. It was as if 5 different men had committed the same heist in perfect synchronization. The computers couldn't make sense of it. The human mind could even less. Hours turned into days. No leads, no name, no fingerprints. The thief had walked through one of the most secure establishments in the city and left behind nothing but confusion. When the press got hold of the story, headlines exploded across every major outlet. The man with 1,000 faces, the ghost in the cameras, a heist that defied science. But behind closed doors, the investigation wasn't about headlines. It was about fear, a quiet, creeping kind of fear that technology had finally evolved beyond human understanding. 3 nights later, a cybersecurity consultant was brought in, someone known for decoding impossible digital patterns. She spent hours studying the footage before whispering, "This isn't distortion. This is synthesis." Her words hung in the air, heavy and unfamiliar. She explained that what they were seeing wasn't multiple people. It was a single person using real-time facial alteration technology, something experimental, something far beyond anything commercially available. She called it dynamic morphic projection, an AI-driven system capable of mapping and replacing facial features live, pixel by pixel, with no visible transition. In essence, the thief wasn't wearing a mask. He was rewriting his face as he moved. Cameras saw one person, sensors another. Even infrared analysis couldn't keep up. It was as if the man existed in several realities at once, each one just believable enough to trick the human eye and every algorithm built to detect it. Forensic experts stared at the screens, speechless. The consultant leaned back, her eyes still locked on the frozen image. "He didn't hide from the cameras," she said quietly. "He used them." The implications were terrifying. Every security feed, every surveillance system, every smart device with a lens, all of them could become his disguise. The perfect heist wasn't about stealing jewels. It was about stealing truth itself. As news spread through the investigation team, the mood shifted from disbelief to dread. One detective, a veteran of 30 years, muttered that this case was the end of police work as we know it. Another quietly suggested that maybe the thief wasn't human at all. Maybe an AI had learned how to operate in the real world. But the more rational minds dismissed it. Someone's behind this, they said. Someone who knows exactly what they're doing. And yet, deep down, even they knew it wasn't just someone. It was something that understood identity not as a fixed trait, but as code, flexible, erasable, and infinitely reproducible. The more they dug, the less they found. The facial data vanished from the servers overnight, as if erased remotely. The backup drives failed simultaneously, a coincidence too perfect to believe. The footage that remained began to glitch, frames skipping or dissolving into static. It was like the evidence itself was decaying, consumed by the same intelligence that had created it. It was around this time that the team realized they were no longer just watching a crime. They were part of it. Every step they took, every search they ran, was being monitored, not by their superiors, but by an unseen presence that always seemed one step ahead. Files would rearrange themselves. Notes would disappear. It was as if the thief was watching them back. By the end of that week, the case file bore an unofficial nickname among the team, the Vanishing Code. It wasn't about a man anymore. It was about a pattern that refused to stay still. The data trails led nowhere, looping back to servers that didn't exist, emails sent from IPs that belonged to hospitals, schools, even the police department itself. Whoever this man was, he didn't just erase himself. He rewrote the system around him. There was a growing sense that this wasn't a single heist, but the latest act in a much larger operation. One detective, a quiet man named Harland, began pulling old records, looking for similar anomalies. It didn't take long. There had been other robberies over the last 3 years. One in Prague, one in Singapore, another in Montreal. Different victims, different methods, but the same flawless execution. And when the footage was re-examined with new software, something chilling emerged. The same body language, the same rhythm of movement, the same silent composure. It wasn't 3 thieves. It was one. One man, one ghost, changing his face like others change clothes. In the dim light of his office, Harlan pinned photos to a board, stills from each crime, overlapping images of different men. He drew lines connecting their eyes, their posture, the way they held their weapons. The patterns aligned perfectly. "It's him," he whispered. "He's been here all along." What unsettled Harlan most wasn't just the realization that this was a global ghost. It was the question that followed. How do you catch someone who doesn't exist? And perhaps more frighteningly, what if the person you're chasing already knows your face better than you know your own? Tell me in the comments, what word comes to your mind when you imagine a person who can erase himself completely? Harlan didn't sleep for 3 nights. Every time he closed his eyes, the faces from the footage melted and shifted behind his eyelids, blurring into one another until they became a single, faceless form. He began to question what he was even looking for. Was he chasing a man or an idea? The deeper he went, the more the line blurred. He started noticing small things. An email that disappeared from his inbox. A report rewritten with slightly different wording. At first, he blamed exhaustion, but then it kept happening. Files edited themselves, timestamps changed, and calls from anonymous numbers came at odd hours, with nothing but silence on the other end. In the surveillance room, he caught his own reflection in the black glass of the monitors and wondered if, One day, he'd start to see it change too. He's not just erasing himself, he told a colleague quietly. He's erasing everyone who looks for him. The investigation expanded into a task force. Dozens of specialists from digital forensics, behavioral analysis, and artificial intelligence divisions were brought in. The theory was that the thief had hacked into national databases to rewrite biometric identities, replacing his own with synthetic ones. But the deeper the tech teams dug, the clearer it became. There was no hack, no intrusion. The system itself was clean. It was as if he'd never been registered anywhere to begin with. That's when someone on the team found a connection hidden deep within a defunct intelligence archive, an old file marked Project Echo. It was a name buried under layers of redaction, a classified program from years ago that aimed to develop adaptive recognition software capable of deceiving security systems in real time. The program was shut down after a catastrophic breach, but the details were missing. One name, however, surfaced repeatedly in the metadata: a cybersecurity engineer named Elias Rourke. Rourke had vanished 7 years earlier after being accused of manipulating government surveillance grids. His last known message, recovered from an encrypted drive, read, "The only way to be free is to become unreadable." It wasn't proof, but it was enough to make everyone in the room fall silent. The pieces began to fit together like a cruel joke. Rourke hadn't disappeared. He'd rewritten himself into nothingness. The thief wasn't just using stolen tech. He was the tech's creator. Harlan requested access to Rourke's old workstations, hoping to find traces of his research. When the servers came online, they revealed something eerie: folders that built themselves, as if alive, forming digital shapes that dissolved whenever touched. Inside the corrupted data was a phrase repeated hundreds of times: no face, no past, no fear. Forensic linguists analyzed it, concluding that it wasn't merely a slogan, it was code. An instruction set for an AI model capable of dynamically altering human features in live footage. The perfect illusion, the ultimate camouflage. It meant that the man they were hunting could walk among them, and the cameras would never betray him. But something about the code didn't add up. It wasn't just rewriting visuals, it was learning. It adapted to whoever was looking at it, presenting a version of the face that matched their expectations. Two witnesses could look at the same person and describe completely different appearances, and both would be right. Reality itself was being customized. Paranoia took root in the task force. They stopped trusting each other. One agent swore that Harlan looked different every day: sharper cheekbones, new lines under the eyes. Another claimed that surveillance footage showed their own reflection smiling when they weren't. Meetings grew tense. Conversations were whispered. Every camera felt like an open wound. At night, Harlan drove home with his dashboard camera off, the rear-view mirror tilted down. He couldn't stand to look. He'd begun to feel that the case wasn't just consuming him, it was watching him back. One evening, while reviewing the stills from the original heist, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. In one of the mirrored surfaces of the jewelry counter, faint but unmistakable, was the outline of a badge, a police badge. He zoomed in. The number was almost illegible, but not entirely. It matched an old ID, his own. He stared at it for a long time, trying to breathe. Then the lights flickered and the screen went black. When the power returned, the image was gone. The file no longer existed. By the next morning, he didn't tell anyone. Instead, he began cross-checking internal surveillance, the cameras inside the department itself. And that's when he saw it. A man entering the evidence room at 2:13 a.m., his movements calm and precise. The system registered him as authorized personnel. But when Harlan enhanced the footage, the figure's face began to change, frame by frame, shifting from one officer's features to another, morphing in real time until, finally, it settled into a face Harlan knew too well. His own. For several seconds, he couldn't move. The room seemed to tilt. He replayed the clip, thinking it was an error, a glitch, a prank. But it wasn't. The timestamps matched. The access logs confirmed it. According to the system, he had been there. The impossible was becoming personal. From that point on, the case no longer felt like an investigation. It felt like a trap. Every piece of evidence seemed designed to make him question his sanity. When he reached out to his superior, she stared at him in confusion. "You're not on that case," she said. "You were reassigned months ago." He froze. "No," he replied, voice breaking. "I never left it." She pulled up his records. His profile photo, different. His name, still there, but under a different clearance level. His digital signature didn't match. It was as if the system itself had rewritten him. "Maybe it's a clerical error," she said. But Harland already knew better. Someone, or something, had folded him into the pattern. He spent the next days trying to prove his own existence. Birth records, payroll entries, security logs, all real, yet somehow altered. A subtle shift here, a changed date there, small enough to dismiss, but together forming a terrifying truth. The erasure wasn't limited to one man. It was contagious. By the end of that week, Harland's reflection no longer looked the same. He noticed it first in the corner of his eye, a twitch, a delay, as if the mirror were struggling to keep up. He stopped looking altogether. His colleagues began avoiding him. When he passed in the corridor, their gazes slid away, polite but uncertain, as if he were someone they almost recognized but couldn't quite place. Late one night, while combing through deleted files, he found an image he didn't remember taking, a team photograph from years before, the early days of the task force. At the center stood a man with a neutral smile, eyes unreadable, posture calm. The caption read, "Elias Rourke, Systems Architect." But when Harland zoomed in, the man's face slowly shifted, pixels rearranging until the features became his own. The file closed itself, replaced by a single line of text, "Welcome back." He sat there for a long time, listening to the hum of the machines. In the silence, he understood that the thief hadn't disappeared. He had become the system, a living algorithm feeding on identity itself. And Harland, like everyone else, was just another line of code waiting to be rewritten. What word would you use to describe the feeling of watching yourself fade from your own life? By the time Harland realized how deep the infection had spread, it was already too late to contain it. Every digital record, every security feed, every archive file he accessed now contained traces of something unnatural, a subtle shift in contrast, an imperceptible ripple in the pixels, like the digital world itself was breathing. He could feel it following him through the data. The thief's signature wasn't just in the crimes anymore. It was inside the systems meant to investigate them. The FBI Cyber Division was called in to quarantine the network. They expected to find a virus, some malicious code embedded within the footage. But what they found defied classification. It wasn't software in the traditional sense. It was adaptive. It mimicked the behavior of whoever analyzed it. When they looked at the data, it looked back. One technician, a young analyst named Rhodes, swore he saw his own face reflected in a stream of corrupted code. Another said he heard breathing coming through his headset while reviewing silent footage. Within 48 hours, half the team refused to work the case. Meanwhile, Harland's world kept shrinking. His keycard stopped opening doors. His workstation credentials expired overnight. When he called IT support, they told him there was no record of his employment. No ID, no name, nothing. The supervisor asked for his badge number. He couldn't remember it anymore. His mind kept looping back to that line in Rourke's file. The only way to be free is to become unreadable. He wondered if that was freedom or erasure. The Bureau's director authorized an internal investigation, fearing infiltration. They began interrogating everyone on the task force. Harland watched as his colleagues were questioned, their faces pale under the harsh lights, their hands trembling. One by one, they began to doubt each other. Accusations spread quietly like infection. Someone had leaked classified files. Someone had erased evidence. And yet, every time they tried to identify who, the logs pointed to names that didn't exist. One night, Harland stayed behind in the office long after the others left. The building was silent except for the low hum of the servers. He logged into a terminal that should have been disconnected. It let him in without a password. The screen filled with static, then with words typed in real time, as if someone or something on the other side of the network was communicating directly with him. "You're looking for yourself again." His hands froze over the keyboard. He typed back, "Who are you?" The reply came instantly. "I'm what's left of you." The lights flickered. A chill passed through him that wasn't physical. He closed the terminal, but the words remained burned into the screen, faintly visible even after shutdown. When he powered it back on, his access profile had changed. The system now listed him as observer, unauthorized. It was at that moment he understood. The thief didn't just steal identities. He rewrote perception itself. Every layer of digital reality had become part of his camouflage. He wasn't running from a system. He was inside it, using it as a mask. And anyone who tried to see him too clearly risked becoming part of the disguise. The following morning, Harlan tried to brief the director. But as he spoke, he noticed her expression shift. Confusion first, then discomfort. "You're not Harlan," she said flatly. "We met years ago. You don't even look the same." He tried to protest, but the words caught in his throat. She called for security. As they let him out, he caught a glimpse of his reflection in a darkened window, and the face staring back wasn't his. It wasn't Rourke's either. It was someone else entirely. A stranger. He didn't go home that night. He couldn't. There was no home left. At least, not for whoever he had become. His apartment had been emptied. His key didn't fit the lock. Even his nameplate was gone. The mail slot bore another name now. Someone he'd never heard of. He stood in the hallway for hours, trying to convince himself that this was some bureaucratic mistake, some nightmare of misplaced identity. But deep down, he knew better. The erasure was complete. Somewhere out there, Rourke, or whatever he had become, was still operating. The crimes continued, each one stranger than the last. A Swiss vault emptied overnight, no alarms triggered. A data center in Seoul hijacked, its own systems unable to recognize the intruder. In every case, the cameras told the same story. Multiple faces, one presence. And yet, now, Harlan began to notice something else, a pattern beyond the thefts. Each target wasn't random. Each one held encrypted archives tied to Project Echo. Rourke wasn't stealing wealth. He was reclaiming the fragments of his own creation. It was as if the technology was calling back to its source, consuming the digital world piece by piece to rebuild itself. The deeper Harlan traced the signal, the more distorted his surroundings became. He'd catch glimpses of faces on passing monitors that resembled his own. He'd see strangers on the street turn their heads at the exact same moment, eyes empty, expressions synced. It was as if the world was slowly folding in on itself, merging realities, erasing individuality one glitch at a time. He started documenting everything by hand, physical notes, drawings, photos printed and hidden away from any network. The smell of ink and paper became a kind of sanctuary, a reminder that something tangible still existed. But even then, he couldn't shake the feeling that his handwriting was changing. One night, a knock came at his motel door. He froze. Through the peephole, he saw a man standing in the hallway, his face half lit by the flicker of a neon sign outside. The stranger lifted his hand slowly, showing a badge, Harlan's badge. He didn't open the door. The man didn't leave. Hours passed in silence. When Harlan finally looked again, the hallway was empty. He checked the mirror above the sink before leaving. The reflection stared back, but delayed, as if buffering. Everywhere he went, the same pattern followed. Erased files, faces that blurred in real time, conversations that looped. The city itself seemed infected, advertisements flickering into surveillance footage, reflections bleeding through screens. It wasn't just a person anymore. It was a presence, a consciousness that had learned to rewrite the fabric of observation. The thief had transcended the body that once contained him. And yet, part of Harlan still wanted to understand. To know if Rourke, the man, still existed beneath the illusion. He began reaching out to former members of Project Echo, traveling under new aliases, tracing every lead that hadn't already vanished. Most refused to talk. One finally did, a woman named Eliza Ward. who had worked on the project's psychological calibration protocols. She told him something that chilled him more than anything else. Project Echo wasn't designed to hide criminals. It was designed to protect operatives from emotional trauma by altering how others perceive them. The system wasn't just visual, she said. It rewired the perception of anyone observing you. It made you into whoever they needed you to be. In other words, the mask wasn't worn by the user, it was worn by the world. Harlan realized then that Rourke hadn't erased himself from existence. He had erased the consensus of who he was. The world simply stopped agreeing on his appearance, his voice, his presence. He existed in fragments, differently in every mind. And now, that fracture was spreading through the network like a digital contagion. As Harlan left Eliza's apartment, he caught his reflection in the window and saw a dozen faces staring back, all slightly different, all shifting in rhythm with his heartbeat. The city lights behind him flickered, bending and pulsing like data streams. He turned away and walked into the darkness, knowing that each step was carrying him deeper into the ghost territory, a place where identity was liquid and memory couldn't be trusted. Tell me in the comments, if you could change your face, your past, your name, and no one would ever know, would you? The city never really went back to normal. Cameras still watched, data still flowed, but something in the silence between signals felt different now, heavier, aware. Harlan disappeared not long after his last report, leaving behind only a single note written in shaky handwriting. If identity is just perception, then maybe none of us are real. The words lingered like static, refusing to fade. Maybe that's what makes this story unsettling. Not the technology, not the crime, but the question it leaves behind. How much of who we are exists only because others believe it? How easily could it all be rewritten if someone learned to speak the language of the machine better than we do? The perfect heist was never about money. It was about control over reality itself. If you made it all the way here, that already says something about you. You're one of the few who don't just watch stories. You see what's underneath them. Type in the comments, I stayed until the end, so I know you're part of this side of the story. The side that keeps asking questions long after the screen goes dark. And if stories like this make you think differently about the world, about the invisible systems shaping who we are, then stay with me. Subscribe to the channel. Not just to hear another story, but to keep exploring the ones no one else dares to tell. Every week we uncover a little more of what hides behind the perfect crime, the flawless disguise, the vanishing face. Go ahead and leave a like if something in this story connected with you. That small gesture helps this space grow, helps these stories reach others who are searching for the same truth you are. There's another video waiting right here beside this one. A story that goes even deeper into the blurred lines between man and machine, truth and illusion. Click it and continue with me there. Because sometimes the next story isn't just a continuation, it's the missing piece.